So it's time to prepare yourselves for week number 8 in your 2014 fantasy football seasons, and I am here to help. I'm going to give you my weekly sit starts as I always do, and then give you some advice at the end, like I always do. Um, but also keep in mind that if you have some last minute lineup questions that arise on Sunday morning, you could tweet me at pfspot_schlegel on Twitter and ask me whatever questions you might have. Now let's dive right in, talk about the sits and starts for this week. I'll go to the sits first. In terms of the players that have injuries, the guys like the A.J. Greens who are doubtful, you should know by now to bench them. Reggie Wayne is out, so make sure you bench him. At this point in time, Trent Richardson, while some of you may laugh, he has been a serviceable flex player for many fantasy football owners this year. With his hamstring injury, he's probably a safe bet to either not play, or even if he does, he'll be extremely limited. So he's probably somebody you want to stay away from this week. And it might be the same for Calvin Johnson and Jimmy Graham. You know, both of them will maybe play, but even if they do, are they going to be nothing more than decoys? Are they going to be limited in the number of snaps and opportunities that they have? The point being is make sure you're paying attention to the injury that are happening. Make sure that you're not taking unnecessary risk at this point in time of the season. Now, in terms of the players to actually sit this week that aren't injured, starting off with the quarterbacks, Flacco going against Cincinnati. I don't particularly like the matchup, even though Cincinnati's defense has been kind of Swiss cheese in recent weeks. I mean, they've given up a lot of points and a lot of yards. I'd have to assume there will be some type of correction at some point in time, and the Ravens have been playing really well. Flacco's been playing solid. I expect there to be a bad game at some point in time, so maybe stay away from him. Matt Ryan of the Falcons this week, I don't know. They're playing Detroit, and I have concerns that Detroit's front four is really going to generate a lot of pressure against that boo-boo ass and totally not talented Falcons offensive line that has really been besieged by injuries. And if Ryan's going to have pressure in his face all day and the lack of a running game against that, really, really solid Lions front seven, it could be a bad day at the office for Matt Ryan in London at 9:30 in the morning Eastern time. I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. We get even more football. Imagine that. And then I don't particularly like Big Ben's matchup against a Colts defense that has been really, really solid the past few weeks. They really, really have. So there's probably quarterbacks to avoid. Running backs to avoid this week are a few guys that have been popular waiver ads over the past week. And especially in the case of two of them, guys that I've advocated at different points in time adding for different reasons. I look at Trey Mason of the Rams going against the Chiefs. You might look at what happened against the Seahawks and you say Mason's due for an explosion. Well, that could have just been a matchup thing, and that could have been a 1 week thing. It's hard to know what Jeff Fisher's going to do, and do you really want to take the chance of thinking Mason's going to play big time snaps and get a lot of opportunities on the ground when Cunningham is going to definitely bite into his opportunities on third down because Mason doesn't really catch the ball. And who's to say that Zach Stacy doesn't take the starting job back soon, or even isn't the primary ball carrier in week number 8? A lot of danger there. Same thing with Denard Robinson of the Jaguars. He had a big week in week number 7, and if you added him, especially in Yahoo leagues, that multi-positional versatility and flexibility he provides is tremendous. But I'm just not sure the Jaguars are sold on him being a featured back. And if Gerhardt comes back and plays this week, he might get some of the carries. So, like I said, again, you would think Robinson's earned the opportunity to get the most carries, but nothing is guaranteed. And then you look at Bryce Brown of the Bills going against the Jets. Not only is the matchup still not that great, even though the Jets have not been quite the same against opposing running games the past few weeks, it's not even for sure how it's going to look with him, sharing carries with Anthony Dixon, because Dixon has been on the active roster all season when Bryce Brown hasn't touched the ball once. With Jackson and Spiller out, I would assume there's going to be some type of timeshare between Dixon and Brown, and I would assume Brown will eventually come out on the better end of that because I think he's a more talented back, at least, for the next few weeks. I think he'll prove that to be. But in week number 8, do you really want to roll with that? You're better off just getting them and stashing them and waiting for a future week. In terms of wide receivers, Cordero Patterson, the Vikings continue to not be able to figure out how to get the ball in his hands. Mohamed Sanu of the Bengals going against the Ravens. It means he's probably going to have to match up a lot with Jimmy Smith, especially with A.J. Green out of the lineup. Not looking like it'll be a good day in the office for him. And Percy Harvin of the Jets going against the Bills. Harvin's coming in, new offense, new team, new locker room, a lesser tier quarterback at Geno Smith. I'd probably wait a little bit before you get on Percy Harvin start him every week bandwagon. Defenses to avoid this week, maybe New England going against Chicago. Chicago could be bad on offense, but they've played somewhat better on the road this year. That's where all their victories have come, and you would have to assume with the up and down nature of the Bears is that they're bad one week and then they're good the next, and you do have a Patriots defense that's missing several key pieces, most notably Gerard Mayo, and now it appears like Chandler Jones for several weeks, if not the entire season. Then I look at the Arizona Cardinals and their matchup against the Eagles. The Eagles can put up a lot of points, and that makes it scary. They might not. The Eagles might score a defensive touchdown, a special teams touchdown, but do you want to run the risk of Arizona hanging a negative point total on you this week? I don't know. In terms of players to maybe start this week, and a few of them I'll go off at the reservation a little bit. I'll start off with quarterback. I think Tannehill is almost a must start against the Jaguars. If you've got Eli or Kaepernick on a bye, you should feel pretty good about Tannehill, who's probably going to be available in your league's waiver wire going against the Jags. That's almost screaming a must-start matchup. And then I look at Derek Carr of the Raiders going against the Browns. The matchup's pretty good. Carr hasn't been that bad. He could have a nice day in the office. Shit, crazier things have happened. In terms of running backs, I like Chris Ivory going against the Bills, even though the Bills haven't been a team that's given up a lot in terms of yards on the ground this year. I do still like Chris Ivory. I thought he ran hard. He ran tough in last week's game against the Patriots, and I would expect him to get even more carries as the season wears on. With the Titans starting a rookie quarterback in Zach Mettenberger, I think they will focus on the running game more, and with Sean Green being a dipshit and getting arrested, I think that could mean more carries for Bishop Sankey against the Texans this week. I think you got to give him a shot if you've got him. Jerick McKinnon of the Vikings going against the Buccaneers. Buccaneers defense not good. Jerick McKinnon did go for over 100 yards last week against a really good Buffalo Bills run defense, which is why in part I'm saying start Chris Ivory. I think you got to start Jerick McKinnon as well. I think he's clearly established that he's the better all-around back compared to Matt Asiata. And then I still like Ben Tate of the Browns going against the Raiders. He's going against the Raiders. They have one Khalil Mack, not 11. I need not say anymore. Wide receivers to look at starting this week. I think you got to go with Julian Edelman of the Patriots going against the Bears. Kyle Fuller may play, he may not. If he does play, he may be limited. Tim Jennings hasn't been the same Tim Jennings of the past few seasons. Edelman's going to get a lot of targets and a lot of catches. In PPR leagues, that means a lot more to you. Justin Hunter of the Titans, I think, is one of those flyer options this week, probably available on a lot of your waiver wires because people overdrafted him anticipating great things and then dropped him once they realized that the Titans didn't know what the hell to do with him and the quarterbacks suck. Well, Zach Mettenberger and Justin Hunter did show some really good chemistry in the preseason, and Mettenberger has the type of arm talent that could take advantage of Justin Hunter's combination, especially down the field. A guy like Justin Hunter could have a really nice week for the Titans this week against the Texans. And then you look at Marcus Colston of the Saints going against the Packers on Sunday night. Sam Shields may play, may not. I'm not sure if he is going to play or not. I know he missed last week's game. You also got to look at Jimmy Graham being hurt. He's still not 100%, so that means an increased number of targets and catches and potentially big-time yardage totals from a Marcus Colston, kind of similar to what he did last week. As I believe I told you guys to start him. I'm telling you to start him again. Defenses to start this week. I think you got to look at Dallas against Washington. They're starting Colt McCoy. I rest my case. The Houston Texans going against the Tennessee Titans. They are starting a rookie quarterback. I think the matchup's pretty good for the Houston Texans. So those are my sit and starts for the weekend. In terms of my advice this week, usually I'd sit there and tell you guys to pick up and so, and that'll still be the case throughout the season. But this week I wanted to talk a little bit more about strategy really quickly, and I think it's important at this point in time as you get ready to head into November and we're about ready to enter the second half of the NFL and fantasy football season, or you're really after week 8 at the halfway point of the season. I think it's really important to understand that in a lot of your leagues, you're probably a couple weeks away from your trade deadline. You have a really good idea of where you stand, what your strengths and weaknesses and opportunities are as a fantasy football team. Now is the time to start exploring moves. Now is the time to start hitting the trade block. Now is the chance and the time and the opportunity to try and make yourself better that way. Now, in some leagues, you play with owners that are unwilling to take any risks, unwilling to take any chances because they're idiots and so on and so forth. They think their team is so great and then they're not, or they're bad and they're bad because they don't know what the hell they're doing, hence why they don't want to trade. But if you're in a league where you've got people that might be willing to trade, or maybe they aren't, the only way you're going to find out is to propose trades. Some of the things I suggest. is if you're really strong at wide receiver, maybe take a star wide receiver and flip him into a star running back, especially if you're weak at running back, especially if you've got depth at the wide receiver position. Or same thing if you have a lot of running backs, but you're kind of weak at wide receiver and you need a real impact wide receiver, maybe you decide to flip one of your star running backs for a star wide receiver, or you flip a couple of those second tier running backs on your bench perhaps or in your flex position into a big time wide receiver. Something I always like to do at this point in time of the year is capitalize upon the depth that I have amassed on my fantasy football rosters. Part of the reason why I stay away from running backs early in the draft traditionally, but focus on them throughout the middle portions of the draft, is because I'm building for times like these where people are going to be desperate for running back help. They're going to need running back help. And I'm sitting there and I might not have a top flight running back, but I have, 6, 7 guys on my roster that could put up double digit points on a consistent week in, week out basis. It has a lot of appeal. So now I could sit there and from a position of strength, a position of depth, I could trade 2 or 3 of these running backs and bring in 1 or 2 other real marquee players in terms of as part of package deals. And I'm not really losing a whole lot because those players, that depth really is not going to matter that much to me later on as the season goes along because I'm still going to be relatively comfortable with what I've got at that position. So now as I sit there in week number 8, I try to now start proposing deals, but I'm not trying to propose bullshit deals. And I think that's something to put out there. You're going to think that it's the best way to improve yourself, and you know what you're doing, and this trade is great for you. The first thing you have to do actually is not look at, I think, so much how the trade is going to benefit you or make your team better. I think you have to look at it in a way in terms of how can I present this deal to where the other owner also believes that this is going to make their team better. And in a lot of cases it does. Like for me, I've proposed a deal for Jordy Nelson where I've offered to trade like Michael Floyd and Marcus Colston and then a running back like Jock Bell. Now you might say, well, that's a lot to give up to Jordy Nelson. Yeah, but the top 2 wide receivers I have are Julio Jones and Demaryius Thomas. Now you take Jordy Nelson, and that is a 3-man wide receiver trio that nobody in my league can fuck with. But at the same point in time, the guy that I proposed and offered the deal to is somebody that, he is a little weak at wide receiver. He's got Jordy Nelson, but not much else. He lacks running back talent and depth. He's hurting in a bad way. So this is the type of deal that if that other owner is thinking about it the way he should be and not so much from a standpoint of Jordy Nelson gets me a lot of points, I can't afford to lose him. This is a deal that could benefit both parties involved. I'm giving up some depth, which isn't as important to me, getting another impact player. And this guy here is getting 3 potential players that could start for him every single week and 3 guys that could potentially produce a big point total on a given week, which is something that he needs. So I proposed a deal that will benefit me from my position, but I also proposed a deal that would be beneficial to the other owner too, and is incumbent upon them to determine whether or not they're smart and take the deal or they're not and they don't. I'll see a lot of people sit there and propose all types of bullshit and dumbass deals, and I'm like, how do you expect anybody's ever going to fucking take that? You have to propose something that is even Steven across the board, or if anything might look like it benefits the other owner a little bit more. If it looks like in any way, shape, or form it's going to benefit you more, unless you're dealing with a complete idiot, the deal is going to be rejected 100 out of 100 times. But the point I get at here is, with fantasy football, if you only nail the draft, you're still not going to win a championship. You have to be able to own and dominate the waiver wire and the free agency list. And you also have to know how to manipulate and maneuver your roster in a week in, week out basis, play matchups and hunches and trends, what have you. You also got to be able to make those risky moves in terms of trades. Trades are a great way to improve your team, especially now you're about halfway through the fantasy football season. You know who you are. You know who you're on. You know your strengths are. You know where your weaknesses are. You can't always go to the waiver wire to get all of your help. At some point in time, you have to take a risk, take a gamble, and make a big-time move. And the owners that realize that and do that are usually the ones that are rewarded at the end of the season.